So I want to acknowledge that I reside on the traditional lands of the Nisqually people. The Nisqually have lived on and cared for this land and these waterways since time immemorial. I make this acknowledgement to open a space of recognition, inclusion, and respect for our sovereign tribal partners and all Indigenous people in my community and yours. So we appreciate all you guys joining Climate Reality Thurston County leadership team in welcoming Alex Durney. Alex is going to speak about the business of farms and climate. So we ask that your microphones are turned off at this time. And you can leave your cameras on if you want. We received questions for Alex ahead of tonight's program, but we will take more questions from those in attendance before the end of the program this evening. And so feel free to also leave questions in the chat. And this timing of the program is pretty great, Alex, by the way, because recently Colvin Farm was featured in Thurston Talk. It's a long time family farm, and gosh, it originated back in sometime in the 1800s. So that was kind of cool. So with gratitude, I want to introduce Alex Durney, ranch manager with Colvin Ranch. Thank you for being with us, Alex. So let's start out a little bit of, if you could tell us about Colvin Ranch a little bit and your responsibilities as a ranch manager, and then we'll launch into questions. You do have to unmute.
I thought I had unmuted myself. Well, perfect. Well, thank you all for letting me talk tonight. Thank you very much, Marianne, for inviting me. This is exciting. We always love any opportunity to tell our story. So Colvin Ranch is a 4th generation cattle ranch in Thurston County that was homesteaded in the 1850s by Ignatius Colvin, who, now that I've had all the time to learn many stories about him, he was a pretty rad dude. He did some pretty cool things. So it's currently his great grandson who is running it, and that is Fred Colvin, my boss. And he hired me about 4 years ago, and I started out as his ranch hand and slowly worked my way up to ranch manager. And that was just by acquiring, and kind of forcing myself into a few more things. And also he's getting a little bit older. He's 73, so he was looking to be a little bit more retired. So I've slowly taken on more and more responsibilities of his and made them mine, so that he really enjoys that. But where we are now, we're just outside of Tenino, and the ranch at one point in time reached about 3,000 acres, but now sits at about 600. And that's just over the course of time of divorces and deaths and all of that. It just got parceled off until we have what we have now. And in 2003, Fred wanted to change that. He wanted to make sure that it was no longer going to be broken up. And so what he did is he signed a permanent conservation easement with NRCS. And that enabled him to buy out his sisters and make sure that the land here will forever be preserved. So it'll forever be an open space, which is a really great thing that he did in order to protect this wonderful space that we have here. We run about 250 head of cattle and about 60 pigs a year. And all of them are they're red and black Angus. We do have a couple shorthorns. Another kind of fun thing about our ranch is we are an intergenerational ranch. And so intergenerational, meaning we have our cow-calf pairs, and then the calves we raise up until they are butcher weight, and then we direct market that meat to customers in the local region. So that's kind of a little bit of like a quick synopsis of the ranch, a little bit of kind of like how I got here. I'm originally from Idaho. I went to Evergreen State College and graduated in freshwater ecology, actually, but ended up getting this job right after graduating because the large animal veterinarian was one of my professors, and he knew that Fred needed some help here. And I just absolutely fell in love with it. And at this current point in time, my partner and we are looking to take over the operation from Fred because his daughters are grown. They have their lives down in California and they don't really want to raise cattle, and I do. So that's kind of how I ended up here. And yeah, just a little brief intro for you.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. And it's really cool that you're thinking of taking it over. Good for you. All right. So what's the difference now in how your ranch raises meat and then a typical industrial operation?
Okay. So the typical industrial operation is typically you have your cow-calf pairs that are being raised in a very similar scenario as ours. A lot of the time they are also raised to the side of what they call CAFOs, concentrated animal feed operations. And then typically those animals are then sent off to like the calf, even actually sometimes cow-calf pairs, or just the calves. Once they are weaned off of their moms, are sent out to rangeland, which rangeland and raising cattle in that way is actually arguably one of the most sustainable forms of agriculture. So if you kind of like blend certain aspects together, there are rather sustainable ways to raise animals. So then the animals are taken off of rangeland and put back into the CAFOs, where they're typically fed grain that is produced from all over the country, if not the world, and then distributed to a slaughter plant, which could be in the near region, or it could be a couple states away, and is transported there, where it is then slaughtered and then distributed across the United States, if not to other countries. That's a typical beef operation in the United States. So kind of from what I just laid out there and what I kind of told you about our operation, you can see a little bit of the major differences between the two. Another big aspect is we are a grass-fed and grass-finished operation. So we do not do any grain imported for our cattle specifically. We do feed grain to our pigs because pigs just don't really grow on just pasture. You have to supplement them with something. We currently just source that from Excel, but we are looking to actually move that over to a local grower.
Good. Okay. So let's talk about methane and nitrous oxide emissions from cows, because we know that it contributes to climate change, but it's really on more of a global scale. And so what do you do with the animal manure? Do you have the ability to recycle it productively on the farm, or do you need to send it off somewhere else?
So for us, with how we graze our animals, there is actually no need for us to do any sort of off-farm transportation. All of the manure is deposited directly into the pastures, and it actually enables us to fertilize our pastures as well. And the manure and pee, it breaks down, well, the pee and immediately goes into the soil, which is great because it gives the plants a little added boost of nitrogen that they need, which is great. And then the manure breaks down within a couple of weeks, if not a month.
Very good. So on that note, is there a difference in processing or using steer manure versus your pig manure? So like what sort of quantities do you need to deal with, say, like monthly?
So really no quantities to be dealt with since it is deposited in the pasture. The only quantities that would have to be dealt with is sometimes we do hold our pigs in some open air barns. And that's for the winter time. The pastures just become straight mud, and then they're just basically in a little wallow. So we like to bring them inside during that time, get them nice dry bedding. And so we do have to remove that bedding, but that is only done. Typically, we are trying out a new system actually this year, which we are very excited about. It's a deep pack system. So we just keep throwing it on there, and that lasts us about 6 months. And then what we do is we just go in there with our tractor, remove that, and we actually spread it out through our fields so that that can then help fertilize our fields as well. So we don't do any sort of removal. We try to use all of it to help us fertilize our fields.
Okay. So regarding steer and your pig food, so their nourishment and reproduction. So what I gathered is you don't raise all the food on the farm that you need to feed your animals, correct? No, I mean,
unfortunately, no.
Okay. So
we used to.
Oh, you did?
We used to, yes.
How far then is it, does it come from, transportation is kind of an issue too. It contributes to pollution and climate change as well. And so where does it come from? How far?
So we source all of our hay from Eastern Washington and Oregon. So it's not going too far. We try to keep it as regionally as possible. All of our stuff we try to keep as regionally as possible. As well as like our processing, we keep within 100 miles. So we try our best to keep everything as close as possible. It also decreases the cost.
That's good. That's actually good.
Transportation is expensive.
Yeah. So, have you had any problems with food shortages during any season of the year for your animals?
This year in particular. So as we all know, this is a big drought year for Washington and many other parts of the country and the world. And that is what we have to look forward to. So this year, it's not per se a shortage. It's just the expense is much, well, there is an overall shortage. We have been able to speak for and acquire as much that we are going to need for the year. And that is just something that's kind of typical within the industry. You speak for a certain amount of truckloads, and that way you're guaranteed it. So we don't have that issue this year. The cost is just a little bit more for us.
So on that note of like climate change, and so do you anticipate any problems with supporting the number of animals you have in the next few decades? Because average temperature may be 2 degrees warmer, 1 or 2 more heat waves in the summer, longer summers, shorter winters, drier summers, 10% wetter winters. I mean, things are changing. So what do you think about that, supporting the animals in the next few decades?
Yeah, so I know that there is definitely going to need to be a change, whether it's less animals on this property in particular, or purchasing other property to where we are able to continue raising the same amount of animals. But that is the issue, is we will require more land in time, or we will have to decrease the animals that we have.
Okay. So,
and just knowing that there's other ventures that we're kind of working into, a little bit of like agritourism. And then we're also, as it doesn't happen quickly, but something that we are looking to acquire is some water rights, so that hopefully our old hay pastures that we no longer hay, but we pasture, hopefully we would be able to irrigate those and kind of get a little bit more grass growth and just overall feed out of our land each year.
Okay. So have you lost any animals due to extreme weather? I mean, is your farm situated where it might even be affected by floods or otherwise ponded water?
So we have lost animals, but it not really in particular, just to like our region. It is a very common thing amongst all cattle ranches throughout the country to lose animals because of extreme cold or extreme heat. And that is just because specifically with small calves. that's where you're losing them because of these extreme temperatures. So if you have a very young calf that's maybe only a few days old and you have a 100-degree day, you're possibly looking at heat stroke for that calf. We do have a lot of areas where the animals are able to retreat to shade, and during those like high temperature or super cold days, we do try to have our animals in areas where they are able to protect themselves and also stay so that the calves are able to stay closer to their moms. And if we need to, we do pull the calf away from their mom and give them extra support, whether in our barn or even in our house if they need it.
Oh,
And then return them to their mom once it's safe.
it's so sad, I tell you.
It is. I hate pulling them away, but the mom always takes them back. So it's worked out for us all the times I've had to do it. And the calf survives, and that's all I care about.
In your house. I try to picture it, but okay, yeah.
I've had a calf in my bathtub.
Oh, well, that would keep it cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So we just put them in our bathtub, whether it's cold or, I mean, inside is a regulated temperature. So whether it's cold or hot, we do that.
I'm glad you're the ranch hand, Alex. I really am glad. Yep. So then the drought obviously has affected your ranch. I mean, obviously. Yeah. So
we don't have water rights. We depend on every little bit of rainfall that occurs here. So if there's not very much rain, we could dry out way sooner than we'd like. And if there's not very much rain in the fall, we may not get that nice fall flush of grass.
So how deep is the water table? So you don't, I mean, do you know how deep your water table is? Do you have low flow?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about 20 or 30 feet, 30 feet at its lowest. So it's not really an issue. Oh, and I realized I did not answer your question about flooding. Yes, we do have flooding because we do have a creek that runs through our property. Speaking of water, we do have a creek that runs through our property. The same areas flood every single year. So we just move our animals to high ground during that time. We do live in a great area where there's quite a bit of difference between where the creek's at and where our upper portion is. So we have nice dry ground for the animals during that time of year. And the best part is during the summertime, because there is that low ground with that pretty high-ish water table, we get a little bit of sub-irrigation. So during the summertime, we do get continual growth. We call them our meadows. We do get continual growth there, which is great.
Is it a seasonal creek or does it run year round?
It runs year round. We did have it go slightly dry this year though. And it was the very first time in ranch history that they have seen that happen.
Ranch history, 1800s. Yeah, okay.
Or at least in Fred's life.
Okay, all right, that's still a long time.
Yes.
So water shortage would limit the number of animals you'd have as well, correct? Probably.
No, not per se, because all of our animals are watered off of a well. And that is because wells are exempt for animal, like livestock watering. So we are able to utilize our wells. So any of that, unless our well went dry, which I mean, we would just drill another well deeper, we will not run into that issue for quite some time. And our wells are already drilled pretty deep. So I think it would be a while till we ran dry on those.
Okay, good. So why should small production farms matter to consumers?
This was my longest answer on these ones. Typically small production farms are also local farms for people. I mean, they are located all over the country. And for specifically local people such as yourselves to be able to support us, it's a really great thing because it gives you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that your dollar stays within the community, which helps just the economic support of your community. As well as the support helps preserve open spaces and working lands. Colvin Ranch is a really great example of that because we have some open spaces that were working lands at one point in time that were purchased out and have just become fallow land that are now completely covered in Scotch broom and other invasive plants. And so we actually on our eastern portion of the fence line, directly opposite, and it's a stark difference. You'll see our like beautiful pasture filled with camas and buttercup and everything. And then on the opposite side, it's just 10-foot tall Scotch broom that used to be part of the ranch. And so by us working the lands, we're able to encourage biodiversity and maintain a habitat for many other animals versus just our cattle here. We've got some honeybee hives on the property, which bees and honeybees are very, very important to biodiversity. We also have pocket gopher habitat. We are not listed as pocket gopher habitat, but that is because under our easement, we do more to protect the land than like the regulations for pocket gopher area. So we didn't need to be listed because we're already doing more than we need to do in order to do that, which in a wonderful project that was done over the last 4 years with WSU, WSARE, which is, I gotta check on that one, Washington Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, as well as CNLM. They did a wonderful project where they came out here and they planted a bunch of native wildflowers in our pastures to see how they would rebound and if they would be able to populate. And then they were also checking our pocket gopher status. And all of the wildflowers that they were able to plant flourished and are now spreading throughout the ranch. And our pocket gopher population has also gone up within the last 4 years.
So don't you have, that's a good story. Don't you have trees on the ranch as well for your cattle to mingle around? No?
We do have a few very large fir trees and maple trees, but most of the trees are on the forested section, back portion of our property, which we actually don't have any fencing in, so we don't have our animals back there.
Okay.
But there are like shaded areas and there's small like shrubbery and stuff like that they congregate around. But I guess another thing of why small production farms also are important is because they do create a stable food supply for the near region. So like many of us saw because of COVID, when a lot of things were shutting down and people were panic shopping, we were able to maintain and continue our supply with no sort of complications and keep serving people in the regional area when they weren't able to get it directly from the grocery store because of supply chains being down. So that's another really important thing about small production farms.
Plus, I think that you're helping the environment or the climate because you're local. You're sourcing locally. It's not transporting from across the country, like you said earlier. So those are really,
and that's one of the biggest reasons why we don't ship.
Yeah,
we don't ship our meat because we don't want to add to our transportation.
Good. So are there any other questions? I've kind of gone through the questions that we have that we got earlier. If anybody wants to raise their hand and has a question for Alex, that would be great. Connie, are there, I don't see any questions in the chat. You're muted.
Joel.
Okay.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for being here. Gosh, I have a bajillion questions. This is stuff I'm super interested in, excited about, local agriculture and regenerative agriculture. And in fact, I spent some time with Fred at a regenerative ag conference in Pendleton, Oregon, a couple years ago. we were learning the holistic management, savory method of holistic management. It's pretty cool stuff. My question is, are you familiar with the Prime Act and what that federal piece of legislation would do to allow for more more regional, local meat processing options? And if you know about that, could you speak to it a little bit? And
I am not too familiar with the act. I have heard about it, but I am not even going to speak to it because I feel like I don't know enough about it yet.
Okay. I know a little bit, but my understanding is that it would allow states to regulate meat processing for product that is raised and then sold within the borders of one state. And so I know that we have just a dearth of USDA processing facilities, federally regulated processing facilities, and that's a real bottleneck for farmers. And it sounds like this piece of legislation would allow for state inspected facilities to kind of fill in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so it would widely open it up overall, even between the state facilities. I do feel like there is a lack of processing facilities within the state of Washington. Even if that act is able to go through, there's still just going to be a lack. Not very many people. I feel like trades are kind of dying, which butchering is one of those trades. So unfortunately, even with our state inspected ones, we are kind of seeing those places drop like flies. We are very lucky that we live very, very close to a USDA processing facility. And we are also lucky that there is an ag business park going in right next door to us.
Yeah.
That is also possibly going to have a USDA processing facility.
Do you use Heritage Meats?
We actually use Minder Meats up in Bremerton. We used
Okay.
to use Heritage a few years ago, but we switched to Minder, and now Heritage is not accepting new customers.
Oh, okay. I know the ownership changed in 2019, I think.
And that's, we wanted to go back because of the new ownership.
Got it. Okay. Anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. That was a great question. That is one of the biggest challenges that meat producers and especially small producers face here. Even people who raise, because there are small farms that raise about 20 head of cattle that very well could direct market that meat under USDA inspection to customers and be able to make a nice income for themselves, and are unable to do so because of the access to USDA plants.
Go ahead, Barb.
Okay, you mentioned you're getting into agora forestry or something.
Agritourism.
Oh, agritourism. Okay, could you explain what you're doing there?
So we don't have very many people that work on the ranch, so doing actual like tours and stuff is rather difficult for us. But thanks to technology, we have started a YouTube channel that enables people to at least get like an inside look at what we do on a daily basis on the ranch. And we are going to be continuing that over the years. And that is something that we also might bring in some income over time that'll help us supplement the ranch, because ranching doesn't bring in a whole lot of money.
Do we have any more questions? Oh, we must have more. Okay, Connie and then Carolyn.
Okay.
Oh, and then
Desdra, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but I feel like you have had your little hand thing up.
have you had your hand up?
Probably
Desdra?
first.
Okay, go ahead, Desdra. Unmute yourself. Connie, you're next.
Apologies. I just saw that little hand go up at very first.
Yeah, I hardly ever remember to do that, put my hand up thing except this way, so. So Alex, I live in Olympia. I'm a member of the Olympia Food Co-op. of course, we sell your meat. I even
Yeah.
do filing, what is one of my jobs. And so I'm always, doing all the invoices. And I've been on the board off and on for about 5 years. And I write for the newsletter. And so at one of my things is I would be happy to meet up or do a phone interview with you. I have been taking notes, but so that I could, I love introducing to our members, information about the people that we, that are bringing the food into the stores. So I would love to do that with you. So maybe at some point, if there's some way that I could hook up with you, that would be great. I'd love to do a quick phone interview at another time.
I will, for anyone who is interested in the chat section, I will pop in any contact information for myself towards the end.
Okay. And the other question that I'm wondering about, I've seen documentaries where, and I know you had mentioned the regenerative agriculture. I'm really interested in that. And what I had seen was on a documentary was where they would move the cattle around. So they would be in a section and then they'd be in another section, and all their stirring things around and everything would actually help that soil rather than harm it. So it was a very different way of grazing cattle. And it was very impressive. It also would mean probably being, you'd have to have less cattle. If you have a huge number of cattle, it's not the same thing, but it sounds like your operation is small enough. I don't know. I just wondered if that was something you were doing or were considering looking into.
Yes. So we have, although that is it is a relatively newer idea, especially with the regenerative agricultural movement that is occurring, which I love over the country. We have actually been doing that for almost 20 years now. So we call it strip grazing. And it's because we have multiple herds. So we have our cow calf herd, we have our 1-year-olds and our 2-year-olds. So we do have these smaller groups that we are able to move in that way. So we have permanent fence line that we then run poly wire off of, which is a mix of a polyfiber and wire, accurately named, that we then use to either create pivot sections in a field. And we always change it as well so that we know that we're not grazing them in the exact same way in every pasture every single year, because that could also do some harm. So we do that, and it allows us to get those animals on there quickly, have them take the proper amount of grass, and also a good utilization of all of the plants available in that section of the pasture versus just selecting the plants that are most palatable to them. They get a nice utilization, you leave a really great length, and then you immediately take them off and they're on to the next section the next day. So it gives us a lot more control over what our animals are doing. And something else that it also allows us to do is it allows us to control for invasive plants as well. So if there is an invasive plant, which we did just control for an oat grass actually earlier this year in one of our native pastures, and we worked with NRCS to do that, we very tightly put the animals in, and that allowed them to eat that oat grass down. And we're hoping we'll see less of it come next year.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm delighted to hear that. I look forward to talking more with you at another time too.
I look forward to it as well.
So we also have this recorded, and we'll have this available as well for anybody who's interested. We'll probably put it on our Facebook page if I can figure out how to do it. You have a question? Can I ask a really quick question before Connie does?
Yeah.
Because Alex, you mentioned something about their belching, and how that's harmful for the environment and the methane. So can you explain what you're looking into for that, the cows?
Yes. So there's a couple different studies that are currently out there, and they're trying to figure out different ways of reducing the amount of methane that is produced from cattle when they do belch. A couple of those are lemongrass as well as chicory. Those are the known studies that I know about. And I mean, there's still a lot to be done with those, but they are possible known things to reduce that, because there's no real other way to reduce that besides like putting a mask on a cow and like somehow having it filtered somewhere, which that's just ridiculous. So, but there are these possible measures, but there's really no way to avoid it, unfortunately.
Okay, Connie, go ahead.
So yeah, the only thing I was actually going to ask a similar thing to what Desiree said about rotating pastures, because as I said earlier, I grew up on a farm, and that's what my dad did just on a practical level, is moving the cattle along. We had a river that went through our property, and he just moved, shut off part of that pasture and then moved them along to the next section, and it just seemed to work. But that's great that you do that. I figured that you probably did. The other thing I was thinking is, do you do presentations or talk to school children? I would think that would be a way of really engaging with the community as well.
We basically accept in as offers that we get, but we don't really have very many schools or anything like that. We do have one, Evergreen State College. The professor that got me this job here actually is like the only school tour that we really do, and he usually comes out every spring and we talk to his class. So I actually was part of that one spring. I came out here and heard from Fred on the ranch, and that day I never would have known that I would have been working there or living there, but here I am.
Is that Mike Peros?
Yes. Oh, hi, Sierra.
Carolyn, you have.
Yes, Mike Peros. And then I guess to add a little bit to the strip grazing as well, an aspect that I kind of forgot to mention about our ranch, part of our easement with NRCS, and I guess I did mention that we have native pastures. I'm not sure if anyone caught that. We have designated native pastures, which are deferred from about April to June-ish. And that is so that the native plants are able to flourish and go to seed and continue their growth. So we have beautiful stands of camas and balsam root and buttercup and all of that. It becomes absolutely gorgeous here in the spring. And that also allows us to later on in the year, those fields, because we didn't graze them, are kind of like a stockpile for us, and we're able to return to them later in the year and be able to graze them, allowing us a little bit more forage.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I had raised my hand immediately after you said there's not much money in ranching. And by now, this is so many questions back, it's hardly relevant. But I think what you're doing is so important in trying to farm in sustainable ways and teach about this. Is it sort of close to the margin iffy financial situation when you're doing this kind of farming, or any farming for that matter in these days? Or can you sit back and enjoy it, although you're working all the time, I'm sure?
There are definitely years where you could run into issues. There have been years in the past where Fred and Catherine have sunk their own personal money into the ranch because they made nothing. And then there have definitely been years where they make a profit. By finally transferring over, because when Fred originally took over from his father, he was just doing cow-calf pairs, and he was subject to the market because he was selling his calves at the end of the year, and he wanted to make a change and make some more money for himself. So about 15 years ago, he decided to start direct marketing to the public and started raising his animals up to butcher weight, started doing USDA, and started making a little bit more money as a result. But unfortunately, across any agricultural, whether it's animal or vegetable or fruit, a lot of the time there just really isn't a whole lot of money in it. If you ask many farmers, they would ask like $7 for a bunch of kale. And if I could ask $30 for a pound of ground beef, I would. Because I feel Specifically for us, we're raising these animals for almost basically 3 years when you think from cow calf and like in the belly to 1-year-old to 2-year-old. It's a 3-year process. And at the end of the day, we only make a fraction of money off of each animal. So it's just, there's a lot of effort and time that goes into it and not a whole lot of return on it.
And a
But
lot
we
of,
do it because we love it. And we
Right.
enjoy it.
yeah, you're very inspiring in your enthusiasm. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
So we're taking questions. Sierra, you had your hand up.
Alex, you saw the enterprise budgets that Stephen presented earlier this week. I'm wondering if you've done your own for your operation, and I'm curious how that compares with what was presented earlier.
Rather accurately. If we sold all of our animals WSDA, so that would be quarters, halves, and wholes, we actually lose money. And if we sold all of our animals USDA, we only make about $500 a head.
Yeah, I think the enterprise budget was $50 a head, so you're way ahead, and that's awesome.
We're ahead on that, yeah.
And where is the where do you take it? Where's the local USDA that you use?
So our USDA processor is just outside of Rochester. So we only have to drive about 15-20 minutes down the road in order to get it harvested. And then from there, it is directly transported up to Minder Meats in Bremerton. And then we pick it up once it's packaged, wrapped, ready to go, and we bring it back to our freezer and then deliver it to the customers in the region.
And I'm sorry for the third follow-up question, because I know Steve wants to ask something here. Does your butcher, your cut and wrap, have to be USDA certified as well, or is it just the slaughter facility?
To be distributed USDA, it has to be the harvest and the butcher.
Okay, thanks.
At least at this point in time.
Steve, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah. One of the tribes that I've worked with through the years is Tulalip. And one of the projects that they have done is an anaerobic digester. Essentially, it's a win-win situation where it primarily applies up to dairy cattle up there, but the collection of the waste goes into the digester. The rancher or the farmer is paid for it. It's used to create clean energy, and the leftover product is still good for fertilizer. I was wondering if she's ever heard of that process.
I have, yes. So when I was in school, I actually got the opportunity to go out to 3 Mile Canyon which is in Eastern Washington. And I was able to go see their giant methane digester, which was fascinating. And I'm really glad that you asked this question, because it is something that I am looking to possibly do in the future for our pigs. We are looking to build a whole new pig structure to be able to hold more pigs. And with that becomes, again, what do you do with all of their manure, especially in an inside structure? And so methane digesters they're smaller ones are available, and they are becoming more cost effective. And so it is something that we're looking to do later. As of right now, the size and cost of those is a little bit too out there for us, but we see that over time they are going down. So it is something that I would like to install in due time, because I think it would be a fantastic way to remove their waste, but be able to utilize it in a very beneficial way on the ranch. And hopefully I would use the energy that is produced by them to actually power the lights and heat in the structure that they would be in.
Can I ask another question real quick? Over in Europe, particularly France, as I understand it, one of the ways that they're making agriculture and ranching pay off, I think primarily agriculture, is the development of solar farms. on the same lands that they use for other purposes? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I would love to even just do the energy that's available through, what is it? Puget Sound Energy, to be able to get solar panels put on the tops of our barns to hopefully take some of the energy output of this place. In due time, I would like to do that. But as of right now, I am not officially the person in charge. But
I
I
can
would
come
like
talk
to
to-
have solar panels on all of our barns.
I can come talk to Fred about that.
I would love that.
Steve, I think that's a really interesting question, and I wonder about the financial exchange of pasture for solar farm, because the way I've seen them built, they're not compatible with grazing underneath them. But I'd love to see some kind of modification or evolution of the design to still allow land use underneath them somehow.
Sierra, it's happening
Yeah.
around the country. Silicon Ranch is the company I'm most familiar with that's doing it. It's actually it's the solar arm of Chevron.
Okay.
But if you look up white oak pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, Will Harris down there, all of you would be fascinated by what you could find them doing, but they are grazing sheep on a massive solar farm down there, and this is happening other places in Missouri. I'm trying to develop these kinds of relationships in the Northwest so that we can layer enterprises with solar fields
Exactly.
that have native grasses underneath. We can graze sheep, is what's been done. The design of the solar structure, nobody's ever built it with cattle in mind, and I think there's some additional cost in the structure just because of the size of the animals.
They rub a little harder.
And yep, they rub a little harder. It doesn't work so good for goats because they climb on things and they'll eat your wiring. But I like to think of the ability to layer 3 enterprises where you're creating energy with the solar, underneath you're grazing the sheep or cattle, and depending on the way that you manage the animals on the landscape, you're also sequestering carbon, which can become carbon credits. That is another product the farm can sell. There's some research you can find from Oregon State University that actually shows that some forage grasses, some grasses here in the Northwest, actually you can produce more forage under the shade of solar panels than out in the open. They've done some research on that. And
Interesting.
yeah.
Do you know what species you're talking about there? I'll look it up. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, there were some species that did better than others, and I couldn't rattle them off the top of my head.
I mean, it makes me think about silvopasture too, right? Where you're pasturing animals in trees, and what species you're selecting for that.
It's a similar thing because there's, from what I understand, you're creating a microclimate under the panels, which is keeping more moisture in the soil throughout the summer, which allows more growth of the pasture.
Right.
Grasses, yeah.
Mechanical trees.
Our shaded areas are typically very productive, specifically with orchard grass. In particular, we notice the orchard grass really flourishes in our shaded areas, which is a great high quality forage for animals.
Go ahead, Barb.
I have a question. I've seen, I went to Hawaii a number of years ago, and they had wind farms with cows grazing underneath them. Have you ever had any wind studies done of your property, especially the higher elevation? Because I think, isn't PSC building a wind farm down in that area somewhere?
They are. I can see it from my house.
Oh.
And slowly there's more and more windmills over time. Unfortunately, where we are located, we are still kind of in a valley. It's not enough to be able to have a wind farm. A really great example of that actually in Washington is around Vantage. There's a great cattle rotational operation that's going on over there below a giant windmill farm. That's a really, really cool project if you're ever interested in looking into that.
Do we have any more questions? Any more from anybody? So Alex, for those that joined a little later, you simply graze your cattle on the land, period. You don't bring anything extra in for them.
We do. So we have to supplemental feed in the winter just because, so that's the imported hay from Eastern Washington and Oregon. And that's just because during the winter time, obviously it's too cold. The grass is not growing here. So we do have to bring in supplemental feed for them.
Okay. And for those of you that missed it, she brings the calves into her house and puts them in her bathtub when the weather is too hot or probably too cold. That is going to stick with me forever. So
I've only had to do it twice.
gosh, I just can't imagine. So do we have any other questions for Alex? You've done such a wonderful job for us tonight. I can't begin to tell you. Connie has a question. You have to unmute, Connie. Yeah, you have to unmute.
We've talked quite a bit about cattle, but a little less about pigs. And I don't really have a question, but I'm wondering if you can share any more about pigs. You obviously must have to feed them more. Buy feed for them, I'm guessing.
Yes, so we have the pigs right now just during the summertime. So us building that extra barn would allow us to have them in the winter time. So we're only buying feed for them during that time. We do have them pasture raised. So we have about 40 acres set aside that we actually rotationally graze our pigs as well. But we do supplement them. We carry out 5-gallon buckets of grain and dump it in feeders for them every single day. And the reason why we kind of don't really do too much with our pigs is our pigs are a very new thing for us in the grand scheme of the ranch. Fred started doing the pigs because we had so many customers that were getting our quarters, halves, and wholes of beef asking, when are you going to finally have pigs? And then he was like, all right, I got this little section over here. I guess I'll start raising some pigs. So he started doing that, and we are definitely very new at pig farming still. We've been doing it for a while, but we're very new. So we're always learning on that.
So what I like about your pigs, Alex, is you have a mud pond for them, or you make mud for them. And those were the happiest looking pigs I've ever seen, playing in that mud. I'm sure I haven't been there for a couple of years, but I'm sure you're still creating mud for them.
Oh yeah, so they very quickly degrade the land right around their water tank, which does work for us because we are then able to just easily flood that out and create a nice mud pit for them. So they have their pasture in the back and the mud pit towards the front. And a kind of odd fact, if people don't know, the mud and having that little kind of spot for them is very important for them because pigs are unable to regulate their own body temperatures very well. So and they also, because they're just straight skin, during the summertime, they get sunburnt super easily. So rolling around in the water helps them cool down. And then also the mud that then gets on their skin is basically like a sunscreen. And so it helps protect them from getting burnt, which if they do get burnt, their skin can crack and then they get infections and it's not fun. So we always make sure that they have a nice mud pit to roll in.
Go ahead, Sierra.
Barb, let Barb go. She hasn't
So
spoken.
where do your pigs go in the winter?
So we don't have any pigs during the winter time at this point in time. We just purchase pigs starting in about April when our pasture starts growing, because we don't really like to have them inside, and we can't have them out in pastures during that time because they'll completely degrade it and we won't have a pasture for them during the summertime. So we do have to keep them off for at least that period. With the structure that we are looking to build, though, we would have them during the winter time. They would be held inside during that whole time, though. And so they would be fed strictly grain. They would not be able to forage, but then as soon as the pasture would be available, we would turn them out.
So do you slaughter them then, or do they go to another farm after when they leave your farm for the winter?
So pigs don't take very long to grow. So we're able to buy pigs that are about 2 months old and then harvest them very quickly. Pigs they're only about 9 or 10 months old when you butcher them. And so we don't have to have them over the winter. And so when they leave us, they're going directly to a processor because we've grown them to about 350 pounds at that point in time. Yeah, so you get them at about 30 and grow them to about 350 within a couple months. We do typically in April, we work specifically with a gentleman who will raise those pigs up to about 100 pounds for us so that we are able to get those early butcher dates. Yeah, I personally don't want to deal with sows. That's a lot of work.
How about boars?
That's more work.
Sierra, I put some links in the chat for you.
I follow them all. Thank you, Joel.
Yep.
Joel, are you with South Sound Solar?
I'm with Capstone Solar.
You're with Capstone. Okay.
Yep.
Right on. Alex, so you said you're losing money on wholes, halves, and quarters. Why are you still doing it?
Because my boss wants to do it.
Why is he still doing it?
Because it's easy. He's older and he's been doing it, and it's just.
So
it's
if you
easy
lose
for him.
$50 a cow, you can make it up on like volume. I don't understand.
So, I mean, we're kind of making money. It's hard. For Fred, this is his hobby. He doesn't really care if he makes money. This is what he loves. It's his tradition. So for him, when I even asked him, like over the years, how much, like when I very first started, how much do we make off of beef, like WSDA versus USDA? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, when was the last time you've done the numbers? And he's like, I don't know, like 5 years ago, maybe. And I'm like, what? You don't even know? And he's like, no, I just love doing this. Like, this is my life. So he doesn't care if he makes money or not. So trying to get those numbers out of him was very difficult. But once I got those numbers, I have been slowly pushing more towards USDA. And over time, we will offer more USDA and less WSDA processed animals because it does just simply make more money.
Yeah, I'll stop.
Complicated answer, but that's basically it. It's because Fred wants to do it.
I don't know who she said.
Okay. Quinna or Carolyn, I don't know who had your hand up first.
Well, I just wanted to comment on that, Alex. I think, we've been with Fred for years and years and years, and it's family.
Yes.
When he talks about his dad, and I mean, it's a whole family thing, and to give that up would be really hard. So that's just my thought.
Yeah. Well, and a big reason why, I guess to go a little bit back to Sierra, why Fred continues with the WSDA is because of the regular customers, the people that keep coming back to him year after year. He doesn't want to let them down. He wants to keep serving those people, and that's very important to him because they have supported this business year after year after year.
And I think it's
Really appreciates
incredibly
that.
important to get meat back into our community directly to the people that we know, right? And so the question to me is not really why do we keep doing it, even though that's what I posed to you. It's how do we figure out how to make that work for the farmer as well as the community?
Unfortunately, increase the cost is the sad part of it.
That's
But it is
that's the easy answer, and I wonder if there isn't some other answer there. Like, but yes, I also do that. I sell WSDA beef, and that's I'm totally committed to it. And I was totally freaked out by those enterprise budgets that Stephen shared with us.
I know.
So for everybody that wasn't there, he said you lose $500 a head if you sell. So correct me here. There was something that you were losing $500, and then something that you were losing $1,000 per head. It was,
Yeah, I believe it was like the quarters, halves, and wholes. You were losing. It was like $1,000.
$1,000 a head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. So the
think
cow
so.
calf operation, you were losing $500 a head. The quarters, halves, and wholes, you were losing $1,000 a head, and USDA, you were making $50 a head. And that's if you actually accounted for your labor and the depreciation on all your equipment and facilities. And nobody actually accounts for their depreciation. They just freak out when their tractor dies.
Yep.
We're not putting money aside. Go ahead, Barb.
So what's the difference between the WSDA and the USDA? I mean, why is there this big difference? Is it going to a different market or what?
it is for us, it is a different market. We definitely distribute them differently. For us, it is, so we market our beef WSDA currently at $3.75 a pound on the hanging weight. So that's once the animal is butchered and then halves and on the rail. And so that's where that is. And then for the USDA, on if you were to just calculate the average cost of what we make off of it, it's about $5 to $6 roughly. So that's kind of the difference that you see there. So $3.75 versus the $5 or $6 monetarily.
Can I take that, Alex, a little bit?
Yes.
If you go to a store and you buy a cut of meat, that's USDA. If you go to the farmer's market and buy a cut of meat, that's USDA. So USDA is the only way you can sell a cut of meat. WSDA is the kind of exception that Joel Salatin really pioneered, where you are buying the live animal and the slaughter is a service that's provided to you. And so you're allowed to do that down to, in Washington state, 1/8 of an animal. But you have to buy that before the animal's dead. And you have to pick it up from the butcher shop. The farmer is not allowed to touch it once it's been killed. It's now yours. So that's the difference between WSDA and USDA. You're buying a whole chunk of an animal rather than a cut at a store.
Thank you.
Sierra,
for
this
clarifying,
might be an
Sierra.
aside, Sierra, but I was able to get the USDA regional office in Colorado to give me in writing that there's no limit to the number of people that can co-own an animal, which was important because I was for a time during COVID running a buying club, and so we could have any number of people go in on an animal, and in their opinion, it was legal.
So the state WSDA regulations are written up in the Green Book. And in there, they state that 1/8 of an animal is what's allowed under WSDA processing facilities.
Got it.
The USDA processing facilities are totally different, and there's only very few of them, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Carolyn has had her hand up for a while. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I don't want to intrude with the topic if there's more on this topic, because I'm going to change the topic.
Well, actually, I'm slightly confused on the topic because feel like I'm a kindergartner in this class. So can you, really quick, Carolyn, can you do both?
I'll just ask my question. You can take it or leave it. And
Okay.
that was my interest, Alex, was about the response of other more ordinary farmers around you and in that you deal with. What is their attitude toward your sustainable practices and all the ways that you preserve the farm so carefully?
I am lucky to have walked into a wonderful situation that Fred has built for himself. And what he has built for himself, and because of what he has done, he was on a lot of committees. He has been very involved over time. Preserving this ranch is important to him. I feel lucky to have been able to walk into that. And where am I going with that? I basically just get to adopt that from him. And yeah, please repeat your question. Sorry.
Sorry, I had to
I
unmute.
lost my train of thought. I need a
It's about the
refresher.
response of other currently more traditional farmers around you when they see what you're doing. What is their response?
A lot of them, some of them completely turn away from what Fred has done. And then a lot of them come up with interest as well for what he has built for himself. Because he is a rather well-known rancher within Western Washington and even Eastern Washington. So a lot of people, and because he has been doing it for so long and his family's been doing it for so long, do look up to him as well. So I can't really say that people look up to me or anything like that, but they definitely look up to the work that Fred has done over the course of his life and also his family's life here.
Thank you.
Anybody have any more questions?
Is it fair to ask a farming question?
You can ask any question you want. Go ahead.
Years ago, I heard of a biodegradable chemical. I think it was called Asta 80 from my recollection, that is basically makes water wetter. And by using it, it not only helps irrigation systems stay cleaner, but it also enables the use of less water to get equal or better results. So I just wonder if there's anybody that knows anything about that, if it's in use locally or not. But water is obviously a very critical resource and one that we need to save and protect at every opportunity. So that's just a question I had in my mind.
I'm sorry, what was the name of it again?
It was years ago, and so I don't readily recall, but as I recall, just abstractly, I think it was Asta 80. I'm not sure of that.
Wow.
It's a chemical, it's biodegradable, and it enables the water to be absorbed into the plants more easily. It makes water, it breaks down the surface of the water, and it enables, like I say, for irrigation to take place with less water and better results.
Huh. Anybody heard of it?
I'm madly Googling right now, and
It sounds a lot like
Someone would
structured
Google
water. There's a professor at the University of Washington wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water. It sounds a lot like that to me.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm curious now too. I'm also hesitant when I hear chemical, but because there's always drawbacks to there's always a cause and effect, with those things. So,
This was biodegradable. It was
yeah.
It sounds like something that might reduce surface tension of water,
exactly.
Oh, okay.
which
You
is
get less runoff as well.
you get
Hopefully.
maybe more runoff, actually. Well, who knows? Who knows? I don't.
Alex, you don't have to worry about it right now because it sounds like things are okay on the farm.
We also don't have water rights, so we're not able to irrigate anyways.
You guys don't irrigate at all.
We do not have any irrigation. We are 100% dependent on rainfall.
And it's worked so far.
It's worked so far. We are, of course, looking over the years. I mean, it could take 20 years for all we know, but we are looking to acquire some water rights in time. And that is just something that will help us mitigate when it comes to climate change.
So do you try to capture some of that rain, some of the rainwater in various ways?
That's a good question.
No, we don't have any sort of capture areas for rain. The only capture that we get is just directly onto the fields.
Gotcha.
You do have surface water though, right? You have a big creek that runs through the middle of the property.
We do, and the only thing, we're not allowed to pump out to be able to water our fields off of that, but we are able to at least have our livestock get water out of that. And we
Tell
use
people about the nose pump, Alex. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
We use nose pumps, and that's to make sure that the animals are not able to get directly on the stream bank and degrade the stream bank. So we actually keep them quite a bit back. And we are looking at replacing those at some point and actually putting in a pipeline that'll go down to our meadow area and will be along the back portion of the fence. So even further away from the stream, because we want to get them, specifically with me being a freshwater ecology major, I want to get the animals as far away from the stream as possible. So we're looking to get a pipeline and put their water much further away from the creek so that we can help maintain that creek bank for longer.
Are you in a flood zone there?
It does flood up every single year, yeah. Yeah, but we do have high ground where we're able to move the animals during that time of the
Do
year.
people know what nose pumps are? Tell people about nose pumps. They're really cool.
They're fascinating. I wonder if I have a video of it actually, which I would be able to show you guys, because watching these animals with nose pumps, and nose pumps are just fascinating, really. I had a video, so let me quickly see if I can find it. If anyone has any questions or comments while I look for this, please.
Can I describe it while you're looking for the video?
Yes.
So this is a way of getting water out of the stream without any electricity or power. It's entirely powered by the cow itself. So there's a shallow dish of water with a little plate on it. And as the cow goes to drink, they push the plate, which activates a pump slightly. Okay, here we go.
Oh,
That's great.
And it pulls water out of your creek, keeps
oh,
filling up its trough.
cool.
And I don't know how far it can pull, but so cool.
Okay, I like that.
You can go about 200 feet or so on these. And so we have them set up where it's actually 2 pumps. So 2 animals are able to water at a time.
Oh, I like that. It's too bad you can't get a cistern or something connected to one of the barns or something to catch some of the rainfall during the year.
Yeah, we would also have to have a way to distribute it. We don't have any sort of hosing or anything like that. Also, a big limitation for us, since about 90% of our property is in a permanent conservation easement, we are not allowed to do any sort of building on those sections of land. The only things we're able to do are graze, harvest seed, and cut that land. So no structures are able to be built, unfortunately.
I love the
So
nose.
that puts a big limitation for us.
Okay. That was cute. I love it.
I have lots of great videos of cattle.
So you're going to be the first Colvin to own this property down eventually, right?
The first non-Colvin, yeah.
Non-Colvin.
I won't own the property, but I will own the operation.
Are you going to change the name?
No, not at all. That name means a lot to this state
That's
and to change, and also to this land. I would never think of changing that.
This has been a very, very good program. Does anybody have any more questions? No? So really quick again, one more time, why is it better for the environment to have small production farms? Why does that matter to consumers? Why is it so important?
I guess I had my little that was a long-winded answer that I had on that one, but I think the most important part and the best aspect of it is small production farms are local, and supporting local farms, I feel like, is just one of the most important and one of the best things that we can do for our environment. So that's why I think small production farms are important.
You're right.
Whether it is animals or it is vegetables or fruit, supporting local is big.
And I was saying this earlier, but feeding humans is never without impact. We can't be on this earth and survive without some environmental damage, unfortunately, but we can look for ways to lessen it. And so I want to thank you for doing that. And I also want to thank you for your time. And if anyone wanted to buy meat from Colvin Ranch, how would they go about doing that?
So we have a website, colvinranch.com, that'll have any information on beef and pork sides, as well as an online store that you can purchase from that has local pickup locations, both in Tumwater, direct from the ranch, and also in Tacoma. And we're also at the Proctor Farmers Market in Tacoma every single Saturday.
And it's at both markets of the Olympia Food Co-op in Olympia.
Yes, the Olympia Food Co-op, and also Spud's Produce. And whenever the restaurant is back open and running, the Mark Restaurant in Olympia that we also serve.
Nice.
Which restaurant was that?
The Mark Restaurant.
Okay, Nordis, yep.
Currently closed, but she is looking to reopen hopefully within the next year.
She didn't really have anywhere to go out to bring it outdoors, I don't think. No.
Not really. She has a very small patio.
Well, Alex.
Can I say something real quick? I absolutely agree. Buying local is very important. And I just want to say thanks to Alex, because, I think number one, you're a delight, and you're doing great work. And I haven't become a vegan yet. I love my bacon and eggs. I love my steaks. So keep it up.
Well, I am here to supply you with more for years to come.
Keep doing it the right way. I know it's.
I'm going to keep trying it, and also to improve what we're doing. I will forever try to look to improve what we are doing to make it better for the environment, because our industry and the people around us rely on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need to support our local, and that's part of the way that you'll survive. So that's huge. So thank you so much, Alex. You were amazing. You put on a great program for us. We're very grateful that you joined us this evening. This was recorded, so we'll probably try to pop it up, like I said, on our Facebook page, Climate Reality Thurston County. And so, Joel, you have a quick hand raise there. You have your hand raised? No? Is that old?
I was applauding.
Oh, you're applauding? Is that applauding?
Oh.
Dude, I didn't catch it. All right. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you so much. And have a great night. Bye.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.